Just ahead, gale force winds, incredible tides, an ecological nightmare, and scores of people killed.
I'm very afraid to stay here. We don't know when the rain will come.
Asia's 2024 monsoon season has been bringing souped-up storms.
If India knows these monsoon rains are coming every year, and every year you face the same issue with landslides and flooding, why not do something about it? Do you think Mr. Modi cares about what climate change is doing to people in India?
This is something which I think has to be seen beyond politics.
And the airline industry is going through an identity crisis, saying it's becoming environmentally responsible through the use of sustainable aviation fuels.
Perhaps controversial, but fairly tried and tested methodology, just not that well adopted yet.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now.
It's a huge greenwashing exercise by the aviation industry. Your thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, look, you hear about greenwashing all the time, but SAFs are a legitimate way.
The Indo-Pacific region is only halfway through the 2024 monsoon season. The last storm in July, a super typhoon named Gaemi, uprooted hundreds of thousands of people in China, Taiwan, and the Philippines. What's worse are the deaths of dozens of people from what's been described as the most powerful storm in the region so far this year.
Residents' homes in Philippines' capital, Manila. Typhoon Gaemi didn't hit the country directly, but it did come during an already intense monsoon season and brought with it heavy rainfall and extreme flooding.
Lahat talaga lubog, lahat sira. Naabot kasi ang second floor namin eh.
In some parts of the city, murky waters were neck high. Dozens of people drowned, among the casualties a pregnant woman and 3 children. 600,000 were lucky enough to escape, but many were forced to abandon their homes.
Epekto nito sa mga residente, trauma, yung takot, yung pangamba, yung worry, lalo na pataas ng pataas yung tubig ngayong oras na to.
It was a harrowing rescue for the crew of this freighter on the Taiwan Strait. At the time this report was filed, at least 1 sailor had been killed, with another 4 missing. On land, Gaemi left 500,000 people temporarily without power. In Taiwan's second-largest city, Kaohsiung, a motorist was crushed when part of a building collapsed. Restaurant owner Lili Chuan said her roof was damaged and water pipes burst.
都要全拆起来，我心情。
Gaemi caused rivers in China to overflow into nearby villages. 14 highways were closed and homes and farmlands were left devastated. These rescuers in Fujian province were able to evacuate over 500,000 people as rainfall exceeded 300 millimeters in just a few days.
And Typhoon Gaemi's winds and high waves may have been responsible for sinking a tanker that was carrying 1.4 million liters of industrial fuel, according to authorities investigating the matter. The resulting oil spill spread to the shores of a fishing village, threatening the health and livelihood of people there. Well, on board the vessel, 1 crew member was killed, while 16 others were saved in a daring rescue. And with rough waters and high waves, cleaning up was not easy. As you can see here, Philippines is particularly wary of spills. In February 2023, a spill caused $41 billion in damages and killed vast quantities of seaweed and shellfish.
Pagka po dumaiti po rito sa gawin po namin na malapit po sa barang namin, hindi po kami makapamalakaya. Magiging taghirap po sa lugar po namin. Yun po kasi pinakinabubuhay namin, itong dagat po na to. Kung sakali pong dumaiti po rito, mawalan po kami mga trabaho.
Epekto na ng oil spill. Bukod sa kalusugan ng tao, sa mga isda, apektado. Kasi magkakamatay ang isda eh. Tsaka yung kinabubuhay ng tao dito sa karagatan, wala.
Sana akong parating sa ating pamahalaan na kung maaari po sana, papanagutin po yung pinaka-responsable sa nangyayari na yan. Para po kung sakali, hindi na po maulit yung mga ganyan trahedya. Baka po sakaling maging malawakan po yung oil spill na yan. O di kaya naman po kumalat po kung saan lugar. Kawawa naman po yung mga apekton. Kaya po sana, papanagutin po ng pamahalaan na to yung nagpabaya sa nangyayari po na yan.
And monsoon rains in India caused landslides in Kerala state, killing scores of people. These pictures are just one example of the increasingly unpredictable power of nature in a warming world. Most of the victims of the landslide were reportedly tea estate workers and their families and children who were asleep in makeshift shelters during torrential rainfall.
We sympathize with you in case you have any friends or family back at home in parts of India that were affected. I mean, looking at the footage, it looks as though homes were built in massive riverbeds. I'm sure that was not the case. But why do you think areas like Kerala, for example, keep getting hit again and again by these monsoon rains?
Actually, we have a large section of the Western Ghats, which is actually in parts of Kerala, where we will actually be seeing a lot of deforestation and also a lot of mining and quarrying, which has been happening over the years. And this is actually affecting human habitat. The need for looking at eco-friendly solutions and nature-based solutions is extremely important. However, over the periods, we have been seeing the construction of hotels and resorts on hill slopes and coastal areas.
Is this unplanned construction or were they given permits?
Some of it is actually regulated through whatever are the regulations which are available. We see that there is a need for looking at tourism to be supported, but at the same time, it has to be in an eco-friendly manner. The construction on slopes which are unstable and unviable is also creating problems. And similarly, leveling of hills, reclamation of wetlands, all these have implications. This is a huge climate change problem which is actually happening. And so I'm very happy that Just 2 Degrees is actually taking up this issue of the landslides in Wayanad, but it is not only in Wayanad. You're seeing landslides in the Himalayan foothills, in states like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Jammu and Kashmir. So we are seeing landslides happening because of increase in rainfall patterns, changes in weather patterns, which are actually affecting, local temperature. So we need to also have hyperlocal weather, to be also addressed.
Yeah, I'm glad you broke up the construction. Obviously, the government is not mentioning that at all. Instead, they're saying that quote unquote shifting monsoon patterns are to blame. What do you think that means?
See, actually, the weather patterns have been changing, and we have been seeing this not only in India, but we are also seeing it across the world. You're seeing a lot of urban flooding, which is happening in places which are large urban metros. We're seeing mega cities facing urban flooding. We've seen that in China. We've seen that in France. We've seen that also in UK. And we've seen that, there are lots of things which are actually happening, which we need to recognize that there are clear early warning signals, which we cannot ignore. The wildfires which are happening is also a part of this changing weather patterns, which are also affecting the biodiversity.
From my understanding, the monsoon season began in June for India, but these heavy downpours you're seeing happened in July. Is that an indication of those shifting weather patterns? Did the monsoon come late? And if so, does that affect the intensity of rainfall?
See, actually, in India, we have been seeing the monsoon coming into Kerala on the 1st of June every year. And this has been a pattern which we have followed right from our school days. We have the monsoon coming on the 1st of June. However, we are seeing that these patterns are not really consistent over the years. And now we are seeing also what is mentioned as unprecedented rainfall becoming a pattern. The unprecedented rainfall is happening not only in places like Kerala, but it's also happening in other parts of the country. And it's also happening. Unprecedented rainfall is happening in many countries around the world. And we are also seeing the heat waves. And you would be recognizing that heat waves are also extremely challenging as a changing weather pattern, which is facing people across the world.
Professor, based on campaigning during India's elections, general elections this year, there was very little said about how the government will tackle climate change on a local scale. I looked through Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Twitter page. He made one post on July 30th about the landslides in Kerala, saying he was saddened by what happened. Then he made several more posts about the Olympics, the work he says his government is doing in construction and agriculture and wealth creation, to name a few. And I keep getting asked quite often, if India knows these monsoon rains are coming every year, and every year you face the same issue with landslides and flooding, why not do something about it? Do you think Mr. Modi cares about what climate change is doing to people in India?
I think it is a problem which has to be addressed at the national level, in the federal structure, and also by the state governments. This is a joint responsibility, which has to be seen as a part of an effort which strengthens the risk governance in the country as a nation and also at the provincial levels. So this is something which I think has to be seen beyond politics. This has to be something which affects the lives of every citizen in the country. And so right from the cradle to the grave, there is a need for creating awareness among people that this is actually a matter of collective social responsibility. A civic responsibility, not only of the government, but also of the civil society organizations, of community-based organizations, of faith-based organizations. And India has a culture of having faith-based organizations, which also have been having a large number of disciples across religions, across ethnic groups. And so we need to really look at the need for looking at how can we create a body of knowledge and an opinion which can actually influence resilience building among communities.
That's a great point. I'm going to close on that. Thank you so much, Professor. Really great speaking with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to staying in touch. Thank you very much.
Next up, well, improvements in design and technology have made airplanes more than twice as energy efficient as they were decades ago. But improvements are needed as aviation accounts for 2.5% of global CO2 emissions, a figure that's expected to rise as the industry expands. Enter sustainable aviation fluids. They can be made from cooking oil, landfill waste, and even algae, and they've got the potential to reduce life cycle carbon emissions by 80%. But they're still way more expensive to make. Production remains small scale, technology needs improvement, and governments may need to provide incentives and policies, all obstacles keeping it from becoming a solution in the near future. In June, the International Air Transport Association warned that hitting an industry-wide target of 5% sustainable fuel by 2030 is extremely ambitious, if not impossible.
It's not a linear increase. And people, I think, have made the mistake of trying to get from where we are today to 2050 drawing a straight line. And we're very clear that what we need to see is similar to the transition to clean electricity. You need to see the investment first, and the investment is being made in many parts of the world, particularly in the US, and that the growth, once we've seen all of these new projects come into fruition, will be exponential.
One aviation expert says introducing add-on fees gives travelers the option to purchase flights that use sustainable aviation fuel to help curb the industry's emissions.
Sustainable aviation fuel. It is a pretty controversial topic these days. How are you recommending it be used, I guess, for us to achieve climate goals?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things you can do from a sustainability perspective. Some of them are tried and tested. You know, we've had offsetting, that's now sort of in a bygone era, and we're into carbon capture now. And SAFs are a little controversial, but I think because they're not that well known. But our view as Explore is we want to do everything possible to mitigate carbon use, particularly in planes. So it's relatively new. Only about 0.1% of the world's fuel is currently SAFs. It needs to be 10% according to the Paris Agreement. So we feel that it's our duty to try everything out there, even though there's no silver bullet. So perhaps controversial, but fairly tried and tested methodology, just not that well adopted yet.
Why is so little of it used right now? I mean, why isn't more mixed with conventional kerosene jet fuel? Or why doesn't the plane fly solely on SAFs?
Yeah, look, I think production is an issue. Fueling is an issue. The amount of airports, it's mainly Schiphol in Amsterdam that can do it at the moment. They're not set up for it. And to be honest, the airlines haven't fully got behind it yet. You know, it's an additional thing. Their planes aren't set up to take it. The airports aren't set up to deliver it. But there needs to be more done, definitely. That's why we've got on board and have started offering it to our customers.
Do you think the power of the oil and gas company contributes to why SAFs are so little used?
Whether we like it or not, fuel is the main way a plane gets from A to B. There's lots of things that are being experimented and tried. Hydrogen, SAFs, they're all part of the mix. But until you find something that can replace those fuels at volume, there's no silver bullet. But SAFs could be part of the solution. You know, if you get up to 10%, if we can get up to 20% beyond 2030, you're starting to really reduce the carbon on those flights. But as I said, you need the airlines to get behind it.
Yeah, also on that note, a report I read by the Institute of Policy Studies said that, quote, to bring the fuels to scale needed would require massive subsidies. The trade-offs would be unacceptable and would take resources away from more urgent decarbonization priorities. They also said that it's a huge greenwashing exercise by the aviation industry, and that it's magical thinking that they will be able to do that. Your thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, look, you hear about greenwashing all the time, but SAFs are a legitimate way to reduce carbon. It's not high volume yet. It's not being mass produced. The airlines aren't adopting it in great numbers, but it is genuinely a way to put less carbon or emit less carbon from the plane. So I don't think SAFs fall into that greenwashing area. They're just something new that's not been fully adopted. But as I said, you know, according to the Paris Agreement, there's a commitment to get SAFs up to 10% by 2030. So the Paris Agreement sees them as a legitimate, as I said, not silver bullet, but a legitimate way to reduce carbon while they look for other means to do that. Pressure will come to bear on airlines eventually, for sure. Right now, there's not a huge amount of pressure. There's some targets that are set. Some airlines are doing better than others, but they eventually will be forced either through legislation or consumer demand or people not flying in the future. So they will get on board, but they're just a little bit behind, which is why we think it's important that we adopt them.
Do you think we generally have enough waste to use SAFs on a bigger scale, on a larger scale?
Look, I think we can get SAFs up to a certain point. Mass production of SAFs is a whole different question. You know, 10% by 2030, it's probably a reasonable goal. I think the assumption is in parallel with that, there'll be other things that come along. You know, will it be hydrogen? Will it be cleaner fuels? I don't know. I don't see SAFs being the final solution, but they are a mitigation. And that's why I think it's important that we take them to our customers. even though the airlines aren't particularly shouting about them.
Now, from fueling planes to powering trains, Tanzania, the East African nation of 62 million people, is known for its natural beauty. Mount Kilimanjaro, the tropical Zanzibar archipelago, the East African Great Lakes, to name a few. But this next story isn't about Tanzanian tourism, but instead the country's efforts to make its economy less reliant on fossil fuels.
By bus, it takes Tanzanians around 7 hours to travel from the capital of Dodoma to Dar es Salaam. A round trip usually means an overnight stay, but a new electric railway cuts that commute in half.
It was a very comfortable journey and very happy because we have just arrived in a short period of time and now we are here. I can do my things, my business, and in the evening I go back to Dar es Salaam.
The 440-kilometer line opened in July, the latest stretch in what's set to be the more than 2,500-kilometer standard gauge railway, or SGR network, meant to connect northern and western Tanzania to Dar es Salaam, a port city in the Indian Ocean. Built by Turkish developer Yapı Merkezi, it's also expected to connect the port to cities in other countries, including Rwanda, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The new railway journey is air-conditioned, has Wi-Fi, and promises to boost trade in the region while lowering the output of commuter and supply chain greenhouse gases.
For Tanzanians and the foreigners or anyone who's visiting Tanzania, I think this is the right time to do business within the country because we see growth in terms of economic activities. We see demand in terms of products. Perishable goods can now be transported within the same day. So this is very interesting.
Worldwide, transport makes up a massive amount, about 1/5 of total carbon output. But while gas-fueled vehicles like cars, motorcycles, and buses make up more than 45% of that, any kind of rail amounts to only 1. So electric rail has the potential to reach net zero emissions, especially if it ends up running on renewable energy.
Meanwhile, Formula One motorsport is getting closer to its goal of going carbon neutral by the year 2030. The synthetic fuel manufacturer Zero is working on environmentally friendly petrol. It'll be some years before it's made at the commercial level, but it's a promising start to get to the finish line without leaving a carbon trail.
So there's two things that make this fuel special. First of all, we make it just from air, water and electricity. So those are our starting materials. But when we end up, the fuel is identical or even better than existing fossil fuel. So it'll work in today's cars, trains, aeroplanes and the like.
This is a point often made that, the biggest carbon footprint in Formula One is not with the cars, but with, for instance, the spectators coming in their cars, or all of the freight and the people coming across the globe in aeroplanes. True, but you do have to start somewhere, and starting in a place where technology can be driven at a very, very fast pace, developed in terms of its quality, but also towards reducing cost.
I'm happy to follow in the trend, how the world is growing, of course, to be sustainable fuel and like zero. What I want is that making sure when we transition to that kind of system, which we need to have the same, less energy, because we don't want to make produce a reduced engine horsepower, more, let's say, less effect on the management with the battery level. So we need to making sure everything like that is stay exactly or almost identical, but then following the trend is the world going, because you don't want to change the DNA of motorsports or Formula One in general.
And that's our show. I'll leave you with pictures of Manhattan, where hundreds of activists marched to the home of Citibank CEO Jane Fraser and laid a memorial to millions of children they say were killed and displaced by the bank's fossil fuel plants.